Okay, so we're recording. So, yeah, welcome to session two, and time flies by so quickly. It's just incredible. Those of you who have been, and I know there are some of you on the call, have been on programs with us before, and you know what I'm going to say at this point, and I'll try and keep it brief. But for the people who are newcomers, let me suggest that with all the research saying that we're really not capable of multitasking, and that while our machines might be able to keep multiple tabs open and have multiple streams processing at the same time, that we're not quite as able as that. And indeed, even our PCs slow down when that happens. So if you want to get the most from this session, here's what I suggest. You know, you've set the intention, you've made the decision to be here. If you can close down any other tabs that are around and just give your attention over to this session for now, I promise you'll get the most that you can out of it. Now, coming into these sessions, quite apart from anything that might be going on your desktop and your email and all that sort of stuff, there's also the mental tabs, of course, that are open from everything that's been going on in your week and your day and what's coming up on the weekend and so on and so forth. And so one of the biggest challenges, and one of the challenges that we're talking about in this program is actually being present, actually being here, actually being aware of oneself enough to know, I want to be in this session, and I'm here in this session, I'm paying attention, and that presence or self-awareness and that ability to focus and pay attention is one of our critical things. And part of bringing yourself into the present and bringing yourself to attention in the present moment is just disconnecting from other streams that may be sticking out of the back of your head. So ideas that are coming into the session with you, conversations that we're running. And to close down some of those tabs, we're just going to use the practice that we started last week, very, very simple one, and that I'm going to encourage you over the next several weeks to use a little bit more as a kind of a palate cleanser between activities and in your working day. And that is, we're going to close the tabs, a few of those mental tabs, with the seat and feet and the 6 breaths exercise. So for those of you who are on the first session, let me just suggest to you, just sit in your chair, just in a pose that's upright and erect without being military, you know, relaxed and cool and let yourself chill, but at the same time upright, suggesting you're going to pay attention. And just now, just allow your attention just to fall down to your feet on the ground. And I don't mean look at your feet. I don't mean visualize them. I mean, just allow yourself to notice that if you choose to, you can allow your attention to fall down and just notice what sensations are there to tell you that your feet exist and that your feet are on the ground. So just allow your attention to drop down and see, can you feel your feet on the ground? So what sensations tell you that your feet are on the ground? And you may have, some people will talk about pulsing or an itchiness. There may be hot or cold. There may be throbbing. It might be just a simple sensation of noticing your stocking or your sock in contact with your foot and in turn in contact with your shoe, which is in contact with the floor. But there's no special experience we're looking for. Just see if you can allow your attention just to fall 100% down to your feet on the ground. Just allowing yourself to settle down and pay attention to nothing else, just for a few seconds. It's okay if you get distracted, just bring the attention back there again. And some people tell me that when they imagine that, for example, they can sense gravity as almost like roots pulling them down onto the ground and pulling the feet down, that they get a real sense of the solidity of the feet on the ground. Just notice whatever sensations there are to notice. And if there are none, notice that too. That's okay. And so notice you're paying attention just to the sensations in your feet. And let me get you to notice that you can choose to shift that attention to anywhere in the body you like. So let's imagine that you're bringing the beam of your attention up to where your pelvis and your legs are sitting on the chair. So see if you can feel your seat on the chair, your behind on the chair. And just notice, how do I know I'm sitting in the chair? What are the sensations? You might feel your thighs in contact with your clothing, in contact with the chair. You might feel the sensation of your body pressing down upon what I've heard people calling the sit bones or the sitting bones. Just see if you can allow your attention just to notice, what are the physical sensations that tell me I'm sitting on the chair? Just do that for a few seconds. And as you practice this more, you become better at, just in a few seconds, allowing your attention to fall away from all of the other distractions that are going on around you and to settle onto something as innocuous as your seat and your feet. And as you do that, then you can take another step that sort of brings you into the moment and settles you down. And that is, you can just start to work your breath a little bit. And by that, I mean, start to notice your breath going in. And as it goes in, slow it down a little bit and see if you can time it to a 2-second count going in. And I don't know how you count 2 seconds, but I'd count it as 1001, 1002. So 2 seconds in, and then on the out breath, see if you can make it twice as long going out. So 4 seconds out. So 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004. So I don't want you to strain yourself. I don't want you to overly focus on it, but just see if you can make your in-breath 2 seconds, your out-breaths 4 sessions, and just keeping, ideally, the out-breath just longer than the in-breath without pushing yourself and getting yourself bent out of all out of shape. And we're going to do 5 more of those breaths, and I'm going to go quiet while you do it. I'll time my own, and then I'll come back. But just work with me on this. Don't just spectate. See if you can follow those breaths in and out. So 2 seconds in, 4 seconds out. Okay. Now, I will suggest, and I suggested last week, that this is a fabulous exercise that you can use when you're moving. Let's say, for example, you're about to make a challenging call and you just need to settle your mind down. Or in a very busy day where you're moving from one task to another very rapidly. You always have 2 minutes, 3 minutes to stop and just bring your attention to your seat and your feet and take those 6 breaths where you're accentuating the out breath as being, ideally about twice as long as the in breath. And what the seat and feet thing does is it just allows, particularly with practice, it allows your attention just to settle onto something that's not challenging for you and to let go other things. And so it brings you absolutely into the moment, into the present. And what the 6 breaths do, we'll talk about in the next session, or is it the session after that? I can't remember. But it actually starts to settle your entire system. The moment you start breathing a longer out breath and in breath, you go from the normal sort of fight or flight area where we spend a lot of our time on the edge of being very, very reactive. over to a kind of rest and digest where the body just starts to settle down. You feel a little bit more peaceful. So it's a great way before that important call, just before you stand up to make a presentation, just before you go in to see a client, just before you go in to see the boss. It's a great, as I often say, palate cleanser. But welcome to the session. So we've started. So here's what we said last week this program would be about. So I said that we're going to go over 4 sessions, look in the sales environment at how we can build focus and attention, increase connection with others, and handle stress and build resilience. And last week we did a setting the scene. Some of you weren't here for that. I hope you've seen the recording. We'll do a quick recap of what that was. This week we're going to look at self-awareness. And I'll explain why in a moment, but that is absolutely the foundation stone of everything that we're doing here. You cannot become sufficiently emotional intelligence to have the impact you want, or emotionally intelligent to have the impact you want, without becoming more self-aware. Without being self-aware, you can't become aware with others and increase the connection. And without being aware of your emotions, you can't manage them to deal with stress. So self-awareness is the building block. Next week, or next time, which as I recall is May 1st, we'll talk about awareness of others. And then on session 4, we're going to talk about how do you use the skills that we're developing here to deal with challenging emotions and situations. So here's where we are for section 2, or session 2. We're focusing on self-awareness. Now, last week, and I'll ask for a show of hands on this. Let me just get the list of you up there. Where are you? Okay, participants. Here we go. Last week, here's what I suggested you do. I said, first off, get your raters nominated. And I know because I saw AFA during the week frantically running around getting several hundred reports out. I know that a lot of you got people's raters in, or got your raters in, got your reports finished, and nice job. I hope you have them in front of you. Those who haven't, don't worry about it. There's still time, and you can still get benefit from this. I'll show you how in today's session. The second thing was I introduced seat and feet and 6 breaths, and I said, try to start practicing that. And I sent you some materials for that. Try to start practicing that every time you start a new task, every time you sit down or stand up, but just a couple of times during the day. And I'm going to give you something that's going to help you to do that a little bit more during today. And one of the things that I said last week is that this is very much a hands-on program. You can sit there and enjoy this academically and look at some of the neuroscience content and so on and get an academic bump out of it. But where you're going to get the most value is if you roll your sleeves up and get your hands dirty, actually getting involved with the practices. And so just out of curiosity, and I just asked for a show of hands, AFA said to you how you could show hands, put your hand up on the console. Do me a favor and just put your hand up if you got a chance to do any of these practices during the week. And this is not teacher checking in. I'm just curious how it's working for people. Okay, yeah, good. So there's a good few hands going up there. Super, wonderful. And for those of you who didn't get to it, I know time can always be a challenge, but trust me, engage in the practices and you'll see more what this program is about. So let's move on into the second session. Now, for those who are joining us for the first time and who saw the recording and or may not have seen the recording, what we said last week is one of the most challenging environments to work in is sales. Because in sales, you're continually being emotionally challenged. And that is, you're continually having people put you under the stress of under emotional stress. So one of the examples I gave was this gentleman here. Let's imagine that our friend here with the hand. Oh, hang on one second. Let me get a pointer, just so I'm able to show you who I'm talking about. Annotate. Here we go. Spotlight. Okay. So imagine this chap here. He's doing some kind of a sales presentation on his iPad, and these two guys are very, very engaged. And we went through this last week. But Mike over here is not engaged. And even though the sales guy appears not to care about this, you just know because you've been there when somebody yawns in your session or looks at their watch or looks up at the ceiling or says something that's smart ass. And inside you feel that the trigger, the fight or flight that we looked at last week and the neuroscience of which we examined last week. And so you're sitting there, and what happens frequently in that situation is You get the emotional charge. It's just like the threat that we saw that gentleman in our example last week to threat to his children got him automatically onto a fight or flight footing. Well, this guy is automatically on a fight or flight footing, and it's affecting all of his behavior, everything he says, and he's not quite as attentive and present as he otherwise should be. So just the fact that this chap is disengaged has impacted him. And what we saw last week when we looked at the neuroscience was that he's impacted into an ancient response, into either fight or flight. And there are lots of ways that salespeople under that pressure show the outcome of the fight and flight response. The fight or the aggressiveness can come out in a sharp tone or a sarcasm or an aggressiveness or a pushiness, which comes in response to the perceived threat that comes from, say Mike here not engaging. Or we can have the flight response, which can end up in the salesperson making concessions they otherwise wouldn't make, or producing, proposals without due care to understanding what the client actually needs, just in the interest of getting out of there and getting away from the discomfort of being around this person who's just not engaged with them. And we also said that there are two parties in any sale. There's the person who's selling and there's the person who's buying. And we said prospects also get triggered, because I want you to think about the last time that somebody tried to sell you something. What they're trying to do is usually, one, they're trying to take some of your money from you, and that consciously or unconsciously is a threat. It's taking away something that's hard earned, and they're very often trying to get you to change something about your behavior. And we have an automatic built-in resistance to change. I think the psychologists call it reactance, where we will resist changing at any cost. But either way, saying to a prospect, using the classic sales moves like, what's the size of your budget? And would you like that in green or blue? Or who else would need to be involved in the decision? Can trigger them into fight or flight and can impact the decisions they make, so that you're doing a wonderful job as a salesperson from a technical point of view, but the prospect is thinking, get me out of there. And what we said was that emotional intelligence is simply in sales. It's working with your emotional brain and the emotional brain of the prospect. Understanding that you are both human organisms that have this emotional brain that's very, very easily triggered, recognizing your emotions when you experience that and the impact they're having on the things you say and the things you do and the way you're thinking, and recognize it's the same with your prospects. Noticing when your prospects are triggered, so that if it looks like they're backing away from you, that you can ease off a little bit in the conversation, not push so hard, or recognize when they're moving towards you and they're warming to the message you're giving, so that you can progress your sale forward. And understanding in general the impact of emotions. So we said emotional intelligence last week. We said the way you show up determines the way people feel. The way people feel determines the extent to which they engage. And think of it in sales. The extent to which your prospect engages with you determines everything about the outcome of that. So we wanted to look at how can you become more aware of your emotions, so that you notice when you're being triggered, so that you can decide, despite that, what in the moment, how to be to make the best possible decision you can, to be less reactive and more positively responsive, and how to help your client to do the same. And we said that while most salespeople have been trained in the technical skills, they understand sales funnels, they understand sales process, they understand their products, they haven't necessarily been trained in emotional intelligence skills. And when they are, it makes a big difference. And you saw this example last week. I don't need to beat it to death. Sanofi Aventis, half the sales force went through a process where they got EI training. The other half was used as a control group. And the half that got the training, which added on top of the existing training that they had on how to show up, how to understand when they were being triggered, how to understand when other people were triggered, they got an average of 12% decrease in their sales over a 12-month period. So that's what's at stake. So what we're talking about is helping you as a salesperson or your salespeople to be able to show up in a way that they manage themselves and manage their emotional reaction to things and notice when they're being triggered in a sales situation, but are also doing the same and demonstrating that awareness and that empathy for other people to be able to tune into the prospect when they get there. And we said those skills are emotional intelligence skills. And where I left you last week was I said that the connection with mindfulness is very simple. Mindfulness is your toolkit. It's the way that you reverse nicely and easily and organically into being emotionally intelligent. And here's the connection. Self-awareness, which is the first competency in pretty much any emotional intelligence model. Self-awareness being the ability to notice your feelings and emotions, notice the impact they're having on the way you think and the things you say and the way you behave, and to make deliberate decisions and set deliberate intentions for how you want to behave and the reactions you want to make. And we then further said that mindfulness, which has really gotten a great high profile over the last 15, 20 years, is all about building self-awareness. So it's very much the gateway to self-awareness. So we're going to take a couple of ways into self-awareness, and one of them is practice-based. And one of them is through a mindfulness practice designed to help your brain develop a greater capacity for self-awareness. And I'll show you how that works. Let's define mindfulness. And if you've been on some of our other programs, you'll have seen it defined slightly differently. All of the definitions work. There are lots and lots of definitions of mindfulness, but for the sake of sales, I picked on two. One from, I beg your pardon, one from the, there we go, one from the author Dan Harris, and very interesting and sometimes irreverent book, 10% Happier. And he says, mindfulness is the ability to know what's going on in your head. So to know when a client or a prospect says, you do know that we're talking to 4 other vendors. To know when you feel that sinking feeling, or you feel your heart racing up, or you feel the hair standing up on the back of your neck. To notice that emotional response and to be able to decide, what am I going to do about that? How is that affecting the way I'm thinking? Because frequently, when we get those interruptions, where we go is we follow the thoughts and emotions down a rabbit hole, and sometimes it results in behavior that's just not helpful in the sales process. So what Harris says is, mindfulness is the ability to know what's going on in your head at any given moment without getting carried away by it. Now, when I put these sessions together, I always have to make choices. You do it yourself, about what material I leave in and what material I leave out. And I found some phenomenally good research material that basically said sales is one of the toughest professions from a strength and resilience point of view, that it puts tremendous demands on salespeople, that maintaining any sort of level of stable mental health and ability to deal with stress is really challenging for salespeople. Because if you are not able to know what's going on in your head without getting carried away with it, well, frequently where you get distracted is when you come under the pressure of difficult emotions. Oh my God, I'm never going to make my target. Oh, good Lord, this client doesn't like me. Or she just said that they're looking at 4 or 5 other vendors. And that emotional reaction that happens, that threatens that old emotional brain, can send you one off in a really negative direction, following all the worst things that could possibly happen. But worse than that, as indicated by this man here, Puddicombe, you can become lost in thought, distracted, and in what we call stress, being overwhelmed by difficult emotions. Puddicombe, by the way, is the guy who founded Headspace, the big $1 billion mindfulness app organization. And I don't think there's any business endeavor where it's more important than in sales to be absolutely present, notice what's going on with your client, notice what's going on with yourself, notice the emotional climate, and to be able to respond in a sort of stable, present, and attentive way. So that's what we're going to focus on. And we're going to focus on it because you only have 2 possible modes. You are either present, attentive, noticing what's going on right now. So you're focusing on the conversation we're having, or the dialogue, the session we're in, and you're paying attention to it and you're here, or your mind is somewhere else. So you're either mindful or you're mindless. And all of the research says when you're mindful, when you're in the present, when you're not getting distracted by your thoughts, when you're dealing with them in the moment, you're much more creative, you're much more engaged, you have better well-being outcomes, your resilience is higher, your stress is lower, and so on. So one of the things that we need to do is build a self-awareness to be able to notice when our emotions are carrying us away and we're getting distracted, or we're running down, as I say, that rabbit hole, losing focus on what's going on in the moment, and maybe catastrophizing a little bit because of emotional reactions to situations. So another thing that's worth, another way of looking at mindfulness is it's about the ability to place our attention, to say, I'm going into a session with this person, I'm going to sit down and do my sales presentation, and I know thoughts are going to pop up and they're going to want to distract me and take me, as I say, down the rabbit hole, but I've decided to focus on the prospect and what's going on here in the present, and I'm going to do that. And mindfulness is about having the self-awareness and the ability to be able to place your focus wherever you want it and pay attention, which is not easy. This particular piece of research is from a study that has been running for the last several years. It has hundreds of thousands of people involved in it worldwide. And long story short, 47% of your and my time on average is spent not focused on the present moment. In other words, mind wandering. And by mind wandering, that doesn't necessarily mean that you've wandered to, my God, I can't wait to be away on my vacation. It's going to be wonderful. Or, oh my God, my life is fantastic and it's only going to get better. Mind wandering in general tends to go in a more negative direction. Back into the past, looking at I shoulda, woulda, coulda. Into the future, looking at what ifs. And you've heard that old saying. It says that 90% of the things you worry about never happen. Well, that's where this 47% is very frequently changed. Focus upon things where you've gotten lost in your thinking, lost in your thoughts, lost in your emotions, and you're losing 7% of your present time. Killingsworth is the name of the researcher. And the bottom line is, he said, when you're not in the present, when your mind is wandering, all of the research suggests that mind wandering is generally the cause, not a consequence, of your unhappiness. So, long story short, the more self-aware you are, the more you're able to harness that awareness to be able to keep yourself focused and attentive to what's going on in the present moment, the happier you are, but also the more effective you are. As you saw, the more creative you are. And certainly if you're a salesperson, the more effective you're going to be. Because being in the present, noticing what's going on in the present is the only place that game plays out. Accenture say pretty much the same. They say that the biggest differentiator for businesses and individuals is the ability to understand and manage attention. So mindfulness, let's say, is about having the awareness to notice, am I paying attention at the moment or not? If I'm not, what do I need to do to bring my attention back? And being able to bring yourself present on command, if you want to call it that. Now, I want you to imagine, and go with me on this, on an analogy, because there's some great truth in the analogy. I want you to imagine that in the brain, that there is a muscle of attention. I want you to imagine that there's a little muscle that is responsible inside the brain for your attention, for your ability to be able to pay attention. And in order to increase your ability naturally and more easily to be able to pay attention, you want to do what you would do if you wanted to build your biceps. You want to exercise that muscle. So let's say you wanted to build your biceps, you go to the gym and you get one of those masochists or sadists that they call personal trainers. And they would say, hey, pick up these 2 dumbbells. And they'd be careful to give you a weight where you'd be quite confident when you start, this is easy. So you pick up the 2 dumbbells and they say, give me 10 repetitions of these. And you go 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey, this is easy. How is this going to build muscle? And around 5, it starts to slow down. And around 6, you're at this. And around 7, you're at these ones. You know what I mean? You're shaking. And they're saying, hey, just one more rep. Just one more repetition. You're thinking, I'll give you one more rep. But just one more rep. And in the moment that you fail and you say, no, I don't have anything. I can't do anything. They will tell you that you've just set up the conditions By training to failure, you've just set up the conditions for that muscle to grow. And they're right, because 2 weeks later, you take those weights and you can do those 10 repetitions, no problem. So then what they do is they either say, give me 20 repetitions, or they increase the weight. And again, you train to failure. And the more you train to failure, the stronger that muscle gets. Well, in your brain, there is a part of the brain called the insula. It's a clearly identified part of the brain that's responsible for your ability to be self-aware, to pay attention, and interestingly, to pay attention to others and to be empathetic. And you can exercise that to failure using the approach that we're going to talk about now, so that you can effectively exercise that muscle of attention. And what all of the research shows is that when you use the exercise that we're going to use now in a few moments, that the actual amount of tissue in the insula grows. The insula grows according to the use that you make of it. It is like building a muscle. It becomes stronger, it becomes more capable, and with practice, you become more able to be more attentive and more present with less effort. Just like when you build a muscle here, you can lift bigger weights without as much effort. When you develop your insula and you develop that capacity through this training, well, then you develop that capacity to be self-aware, to be present, to notice what's going on with yourself and others, and that gives you an advantage over people who don't have that. So we're going to do some of that brain training. And the brain training is the most simple form of mindfulness meditation. Now, if you've never practiced meditation before, please don't let the M word put you off. This is simply a mental exercise designed to improve the self-awareness and attention-paying capacity of your brain. Nothing more. It's terribly simple. It can take as little as 5 or 6 minutes a day. I'm going to give you a practice that'll take you about 12 or 13 minutes a day. And I'm going to suggest to you that if at the between now and the next session, you get a bit of practice in pretty much every day, that you'll start to notice some changes and differences and benefits. So let's do the first piece of exercise. Come into my gym and let's do the first exercise here. So again, what I'm going to get you to do is just sit yourself in a position that's comfortable. Upright, but not stiff. And you might just let your shoulders drop if they're held high, if there's any tension. If you feel any clenching in your jaws or anything like that, in general, just let it go and just chill. And just bring your attention for a few moments. Allow your attention to drop down to your seat and your feet. So just while we're sitting here, and I'll time it for a few seconds. Let me just get my timer in front of me. I'll time it for a few seconds to allow your attention to settle down and just notice your seat, your feet on the ground and your legs and your sitting bones on the chair, and just allow your attention to go there for a moment. Just noticing any sensations that might be there. Again, not looking for any special experience, but just, do you feel any tingling? Hot, cold? Can you feel where your legs are in contact with the chair, your feet are in contact with the floor? Just allowing yourself to settle. And the more you do that simple opening, the more your brain starts to associate that with settling down and disconnecting. And so we'll open several of our practices with that. Now, we're now going to go into the breath meditation, the brain exercise. If you're in an open office where it's not practical to close your eyes, well, then you can just, during this exercise, allow your eyes to drop down to a spot on the ground, maybe 3 to 5 feet, 1 to 1.5 meters in front of you, in front of your chair, and just allow your focus to go soft. But if you're in a place where it's okay to close your eyes and you're comfortable doing so, well, then I invite you to do so, because you're just cutting out some of those distractions that are naturally around you in your environment. So letting your eyes gently close or fall down to a soft focus. Just begin to pay attention to your breath. And what I mean by that is follow your breath right from the time it goes in through your nostrils, down into your chest, swelling out your chest and your abdomen, coming to the top of the breath, and then the abdomen collapsing, the chest deflating, and the breath going back out through your nose. And just see if you can follow the breath just in a cycle. Go all the way in through the nose, down into an expanding chest and abdomen, pausing for a moment at the end, and then reversing the cycle and just noticing it going in and out, not trying to change it. It's not like the first exercise we did, you're just paying attention to it. And just seeing if you can follow a cycle of the breath. One cycle of breath going in, then back out again. And some people find that it's easier to pick a single spot to pay attention to the breath as it passes by. So you might, for example, notice that the breath as it's going in past your nostrils is cooler than when it comes back out again. So you might just allow your attention to settle at the nostrils, noticing the breath that goes in and goes out. Some people choose to pay attention to the abdomen as it goes up and down, and just notice the breath as it rises the chest and the abdomen, and as the chest and abdomen falls, and just noticing the passage of the breath. And just following a few cycles like that, in and out. Now, if you're human, one of the first things that happens is very quickly you become distracted. Seems like a very simple thing just to pay attention to your breath, but the reality is that there's so much distraction from the thoughts flying through our heads and the noises around us, and in general, the unusual situation we find ourselves in this exercise, that you could sometimes find, oh my God, I'm no longer focused on the breath. And that's okay. That is absolutely normal, and that's what you should expect. And that is the entire intention of the exercise. So here's what I want to say to you. That's not a failure. In the moment that you notice you're distracted, simply name that distraction. So you're following your breath and you suddenly realize, oh darn, I'm no longer following it. Just, is it a thought that distracted you? In which case just say thinking. Is it a noise that distracted you? Just say noise. Is it a story? Did you run off into a little fancy? You might say story. But whatever it is, give it a label. Don't be hard on yourself. It's normal. It's the point of the exercise. And go back to focusing on the breath. So when you notice a distraction, just say distraction, noise, thought, thinking, whatever it is, and then go back to focusing on the breath. And if that happens 1,000 times during the session, that's okay. Because I'm not trying to help you build a capacity to have perfect attention where you never lose attention to your breath. You won't. The key thing in this exercise is to notice when you lose attention. So every time you notice you're distracted, you just became more self-aware. So let's sit in silence just for a few moments, following the breath in and out, noticing when you become distracted. And when you do, simply giving a label, going back to the breath and carrying on, and not giving yourself a hard time, because I'm going to explain to you the whole point of this exercise is that you will be distracted. So let me go silent and you follow a few cycles of the breath in and out, following that approach. In a moment, I'll ring the bell. And when I do, just simply take a last breath, make it nice and deep, let it out. Open your eyes till they're closed. You can stretch if you want to, and we'll carry on. Okay. So let me just unpack that exercise. Those of you who have meditated before, you'll know that when you started, it can be challenging not to fall into, oh God, I can't even focus on my breath. The whole point of this exercise is to pay attention to some object. We're using the breath because it's convenient, and then to notice when we lose attention. So when you started, here's what was going on. I said, follow your breath. And in the first few seconds, maybe for the first few breaths, you were quite calm, quite collected, quite happy. You were focused on the breath, noticing going in and out. And then at some stage you said, well, darn, I'm no longer focused on it. What the hell happened? Where was I? My mind was somewhere else. This is exactly the point of this exercise. In the moment that you noticed that you're distracted, you just became more attentive. It's called meta attention. In other words, attention to attention. Noticing that you have become distracted is the critical faculty that you're developing here. So when your attention, when you get distracted, either by you suddenly find that you're thinking a thought has hijacked you and taken you away, or you're worrying about something that is going to happen after the session, or you're fantasizing, you're caught in a story. As long as you give it a label and you just say, oh, I lost attention, the insula now starts to understand it's one repetition. That's training to failure. It's like when you go to lift a weight and you can't, and your gym, your personal trainer tells you you've just set up the conditions for the muscle to grow. That's exactly what you're doing here. Every time you notice you have failed, you are actually succeeding, because the more that you build that capacity to be able to notice when the object of your attention has been lost, when you've been distracted, well, then the better your focus becomes. So the critical thing when you notice you're distracted is don't say, darn, I can't even keep focused on my breath. And anybody should be able to do this. Everybody gets distracted. It's normal. The critical thing is just to say, I'm distracted. That was a sound. I was thinking. I was worrying. I don't know what happened. I was sleeping. Give it a label and continue back to the breath. And as you go through that cycle, okay, and you can see we're going from follow the breath, get distracted, bring it back to the breath, you're doing repetitions. And every one of those repetitions is building the capacity of your insula, building the tissue in your insula, so that ultimately you get a greater attentional focus. And you get that attentional focus from noticing, oh, I've been distracted. Oh, I'm back. Oh, I got distracted again. Oh, I'm back. So you spend more of your time focused and less of your time distracted. And so what I say to you, when I give you the practice for during the week, which I'm going to, is that this is about fundamentally building your actual tissue to be able to bring greater attention and self-awareness into any situation. But we're talking about you and as a salesperson or a coach to salespeople or a manager to salespeople, we're talking in that situation about being able to bring that presence into a sales situation. So what I want to get you started on is doing that practice daily. And I'm going to get you to download a free app. And we've published our recorded meditations into that app. I'll tell you more about it at the end of the session. So I have 3 to-dos for you between now and the next session. This is the first one. So let's move on to the second phase of this. So the first one is working with the brain and developing the brain's capacity for attention. That's going to develop your self-awareness. But another great way to develop your self-awareness is to ask people, how do you experience me? How do I show up? And that's a hard thing to do, which is why the assessment that you completed exists. So we gave you an assessment that was the assessment that's tied to the same sorts of behaviors as you looked at in the EI experience last week, looking at observable, emotional, intelligent behaviors. There are 42 behaviors that we look at. If you demonstrate those 42 behaviors, people experience you as being emotionally intelligent, experience you as being engaging. Remember last week, and I said it already today, The way you show up or the way you behave determines the way people feel. The way people feel determines the extent to which they engage. Well, this is about what are the behaviors that actually put people into a productive or a positive frame of mind. And so many of you already completed a report. I'm hoping if you did that you have it in front of you. If you don't and you haven't got it complete, don't worry. You can use the sample report, and if you have that printed in front of you, fantastic. And again, if you don't worry, because you're going to get a recording of this session. And this part is a part that I'm going to go through over a period of about 15 minutes. But I'm going to suggest that you need to go back into it with your report and look in a little bit more detail between now and the next session. But in this report, you're going to get a lot of information about the way people experience you. You're going to get an opportunity to know who it is that people know as you. Now, every single one of us has some space to improve when it comes to the way we show up. And you've invested time and energy, and you've asked some of your colleagues to invest time and energy, and we have invested time and energy. Thank you, Aoife. You've done all the heavy lifting on this, and we've invested money in the reports. And honestly, if something doesn't change as a result of this, if you don't find something in this report, and we don't help you find something in this report that allows you to make a decision to show up even slightly differently in a way that's going to have a more positive impact on the people who are important to you, well, then it was a waste of your time and a waste of your energy. I don't want you to have wasted your time, and I don't want us to have wasted their time and money. So what we want to do is walk through a process to help you work through that report without having to look at every blasted number that's in it, to find one or two areas where you say, those are the ones that I want to make a change in. Those are the things that if I change them, would have a big impact on the people I love, the people I work with, the people I work for, my clients, my prospects, and so on. So you have a report that gives you a unique opportunity. It gives you an opportunity to look at through the eyes of other people at how you show up. I want to show you how to navigate that before next week so that you know what you're going to do to show up in a way that's more productive for you and more productive for them. If you got your report in front of you, open it up to page 7. If you've got the sample report in front of you, open it up to page 7. If you're watching the recording and you don't have the report in front of you, pause the recording, go and get the report, print it off, don't flick from screen to screen, and when you're ready, start the recording again. Now, if folks, you're on the live session and you don't have the report in front of you, please just stay with the screen for now, because it's better just to follow what's going on the screen. Ideal is you have a hard copy of the report, you follow the screen. But that's something you do later in more detail. So you'll notice if you go into page 7 that we measure 6 things in the model. We measure self-awareness, which is what our focus this week, awareness of others, authenticity, emotional reasoning, resilience, and positive influence. And you'll see that that there are 6 of these kind of summary scales. I often refer to them as thermometers, just for shorthand. And those thermometers, they summarize what the people who fed back on you were telling you. So a couple of things going on. That's on page 7. And you see there are 6 of those, 1 for each scale. So each of those scales, so let's say in this case it's self-management, have 7 specific, observable, demonstrable, emotional, intelligent behaviors. Things that, if you demonstrate them to people, have a positive impact of putting them into a productive place. Some of them you already demonstrate, some of them not as well as you might. Let me give you a for example. One of the items is manages their emotions effectively in difficult situations. And you saw that last week. It was one of the ones in the best boss, worst boss exercise that we did. So what we did was we asked people to, first, we took each of those items and we said to people, hey, to what extent is it important to you that Deiric demonstrates this? And, it's not important to me at all. It's slightly important, all the way up to up to highly important. And what's really important for you and I to take on is, this is probably one of the very few times in our lives when the people around us tell us Here's the way I'd like to see you show up. Here's how to motivate me. Here's how to engage me. And I want you to think of the people that you selected to feedback in your report. And I'm presuming they're somewhat important to you. They've just given you in your report information that says, here's the way to get the best out of me. Here's the way you need to show up. So the importance level, which they give on every one of those items, tells you what is it they're looking for in order to engage with you fully. And then we say for each of those items, hey, to what extent does Deiric demonstrate it? And we ask them to compare, or ask them to compare you to the rest of the population. We say, does he demonstrate that behavior significantly less than others, average, typical, all the way up to significantly more than others? And so we've got something that says, here's what I'd ideally like from Deiric. Here's the way I experience Deiric right now. And what I'll say to you is every time there is a gap, okay, every time you get a level of importance higher than a level of demonstration, it's not a failure. It's an opportunity. When somebody says, this is really important to me and Deiric's not delivering it, there's an opportunity. A small change in the way you show up can have a dramatic impact on people. So you'll see when you look at page 7 that there are 6 of these thermometer scales. And they summarize the score for each scale. So you got a 4.8, it's the overall score for the 7 items there. And a 3.6 is the overall score for the demonstration. So 4.8 importance, 3.6 level of demonstration, obviously smaller, probably 20% smaller. Is it 20%? Yeah, it's about 20% smaller. So it's a great opportunity. So what we then do from pages 8 to 18 is we give you more details on each of those scales. There's a page for each of the scales that goes into the items. And it gives you the item by item scores, so the behavior score. So each person who fed back, they said, here's the importance of the extent to which he manages emotions effectively in different situations. Here's the demonstration, 4.8, 3.8. And then we calculate the difference. And we use a traffic light analogy to tell you where to focus. If it's green, it means there's a very small gap between what they expect and what they're seeing. If it's yellow, there's a larger gap, and it really means bit of misalignment, pay attention. If it's orange, there's a larger gap again, and that means really pay attention. So in this program, I'm going to be suggesting to you that you focus on 2 things mostly. We'll look at the yellows for sure in some of your reports, and you will look at them, but in general, I'm going to say, make sure you know what the greens are. These are the places where those people who you ask to feedback are saying you're knocking it out of the park. You're doing a great job. The reds, or the oranges, I should say, are situations where they say there's quite a distance between the way I'd like to see Deiric show up and the way he actually shows up. So that's where most of our focus is going to be. But let me give you a bonus, and it's a completely, totally separate measure. I just want you and I mostly to be focused on this importance, demonstration, and difference. But let me tell you, there's something else in there. This box here is calculated as a benchmark. It's calculated by Genos every year from looking at the tens of thousands of people that go through our assessments. And we look at what's the average range of scores that people achieve on each of these behaviors, each of these scales. And so here, this box represents the average group. So it runs from, let's say, about 3.8 to maybe 4.6. You can see that this 3.6 is a little bit short of that. So it means that on self-management, this person, Deiric, is a little bit less than is typical or less than is average in the population. If the box was up, if the line was up and it was in there, he's about the same as everybody else. And if it's above, he's higher. And we do that at a scale level or at an item level too. So here down here, BM stands for benchmark. It's just taking the same thing down here, but behavior by behavior. And you say, hey, look, this is about the same as everybody else in the population. This is lower than is typical of people in the population. And if it was an up and an arrow, it'd be higher than is typical people in the population. And so it gives you an idea of how do I compare to the world outside. But where we care, because we're building self-awareness, we really care about how do I show up to the people that are important to me, and hopefully the people that you got to feedback in your report are somewhat important to you. So we've got 3-4 people feeding back on you. They're commenting on a 5-point scale. in 42 items. So there's a lot of data in there. And what I want to help you do is cut down through that to just one or two of them that feel most important to you. And I'm going to show you the process we use for doing that. Now, I'm going to go through this step by step without pausing to give you time to think. Because my recommendation is that you go back to this recording when we release it, you have your report in front of you, and you pause it after each step. But if we did that, we'd be into a 2.5-hour session. So we won't do that. But I want you to see what the steps are. So you'll open up your report, and I'll ask you to go first. Let's imagine you're looking at the recording now. Go to page 7, and you'll have those thermometers, as I call them. Now, I've just told you how they work. I've told you about the level of importance. I've told you about the level of demonstration. I want you to think about the people who fed back on you. I want you to think about the relationship you have with them. I want you to think about the relationship you'd ideally like to have with them. And holding that in mind, I want you to think, if I only had time to dive deeply into one of these scales, which one feels like the right one to start with? So which one is most important to you? And it might be, you might look at it and say, I'm going to go for this one because it's the lowest numerically. Or in our example, I might go for this one because authenticity is something that's terribly, terribly important to me. Or you might go for this one because self-awareness, there's a sizable gap in self-awareness. But that's a decision you have to make. You think about your environment, what you know about yourself and the people you're working with. Which of these scales is most worthy of your attention? And just so that you really make that a thoughtful process, I'll ask you to justify it yourself. So if you say, for example, it's authenticity, say to yourself, well, why did I pick that one? Well, because one of the things I value greatly is people being authentic and truthful and trustworthy. And honestly, anything less than a 5 is not acceptable to me. That's what I want to focus on. Or emotional reasoning, and you'll see definitions for these in the reports. Being able to use my understanding of my emotions and feelings and how it's impacted the way the things I'm doing and the way I show up to make better decisions is really important to me. So I'm going to focus on that. So you select one, which is most important. And right away, you've cut down your job. You had got 6 scales. Now you got 1. And I'm going to pick authenticity just for this experiment. So when you pick that, just go straight past any other pages to the detail page that gives you the detail on that particular scale. In this case, it's authenticity. What I'd suggest to you is try to overcome the tendency that you and I all have to look at the negative. So give yourself a pause. When I ask this question, stop the recording and say, looking at these results, what do your colleagues see you do well? What are they seeing you do well? Where are those behaviors where they're green so that the gap between the importance and the demonstration is very low? And in fact, this tick mark here means that the demonstration is actually higher, the same or even higher than the importance level. So just what are you doing really well? And make sure that you set the intention for yourself, that you say to yourself, I'm going to continue to do that. It's really important. Great to know that. And then, so in this situation, I might have picked upon honors commitments and keeps promises. So how does that show up in your day-to-day interactions? Why would they be saying you do that so well? This is about self-awareness. You need to know, how am I doing what I'm doing? Be aware of the things you're really strong on. And then I would turn it over and I'd say, when you spent some time on that, what's your biggest opportunity to improve? How could you improve the way you show up? What could use some attention? So you look through those items and you see, which one of this scale, which is so important to me, should I really pay attention to right now and do something about? And the obvious one to pick might be this one, because it's lower and it's got the orange. You're looking at your scores. You might actually pick this one. You may say, I know this is a bigger gap, but for me, I think it's more important that I start to be able to deal with challenging conversations more effectively. That's your decision. So think then, how does this show up? What does it look like in the workplace? What was the last time that this was an issue? Why are people saying that you don't encourage people or others to express themselves? So start to think, how could I approach this differently? How would I change this? How would I show up in a way that would be more effective? What can I do differently next time? How will I remember to do that? Who do I know that does that very well? And what you're trying to get to is some kind of an action. You're trying to say, here's the way I'm going to change the way I show up. Here's the way I'm going to deal with people in the future. Now, each time you're looking through this report, as you're thinking, you're going to get ideas and thoughts and insights. And anything, any insight you get, it doesn't matter how simple it is, I want you to write it down. Oh, sorry, I did this morning as well. I almost forgot. Your report may also have some free text comments in there. Take a look at those. Sometimes some of the things that people contribute outside of the formal scores are just as useful as the scores. So you hear, say here, for example, that Sally, she could probably focus more on checking in with those around her and being sensitive to her circumstances. Really usable info. Sometimes there are good comments there, sometimes there are no comments. But either way, when you're working through this, anytime you have an insight, write it down. So it might be, hey, I know myself. Anytime I go into a sales meeting, I'm so focused on what I want to achieve, I forget about the prospect. Or I get so excited about what I do that I forget to ask other people what's important to them. Doesn't matter how insignificant it seems to you, write down every insight and then try to see, what can I do about this that's different? And you can use the who, what, where, when approach to that. So your action might be consist of, in future, I'm going to open all sales meetings with, what would you like to take away from this meeting? And that's getting you focused on taking and soliciting input from other people. And in fact, if I had space, I would have said, what would you like to take away from this meeting at the beginning of it? And then at the end of each meeting, did we achieve what you wanted to achieve from the meeting? Then you're tuning in. And as you design these actions, I'd say, think, what's in it for me to make that happen? So honestly, you are not going to do anything unless there's something in it for you. We call it benefits there, but I would say, is this worth your while? If it's not, don't do it. If it's not going to have a positive impact on people, don't do it. If there's nothing in it for you, you won't do it. So if it's something that feels like it's worthwhile, make sure that you get down on paper, here's what the benefit to me is. It means I'll show up as being more consultative. My prospects will feel that my focus is upon their needs. And I think for that reason that I'll get a better relationship with them. So once you go through that process, I beg your pardon, I hit that too soon. Once you go through that simple process of cutting down from 6 scales down to 1, and then from 7 items down to 1, and creating an action, if you get an action, you say, this is something specific I can do differently. You can change the way you impact people completely. So for next week, what I'm asking you to do is make sure that you take your report, you print it off if you haven't this week, and that you open up this recording and that you play this part back again and you get yourself to 1 or 2 actions. And just work through the report and say, what can I change that would make me a better person, a better salesperson, would have a better impact upon people? So that's the second action that I'm giving you before next week. And finally, we're going to really blow out self-awareness. The first thing that we did was we started with an exercise that's going to develop your brain's capacity to be more self-aware. Second thing was you're looking at all the people around you who are saying, here's what we see. So there's an element of self-awareness. And now what I want you to do is be able to, oh, I'm going the wrong way, aren't I? Yes, I am. 1 second. There we go. I want you to be able to see, to able to tune into, what are my strengths? What are the areas that challenge me, and so on. And Dan Goleman, this is the father of emotional intelligence, he says that self-awareness is knowing your internal preferences and resources. And he basically says you need to know, what are your biases? What do you really like doing? What do you really dislike doing? What are you good at? What are you challenged by? And there's a very simple process you can use to build that. And it really rounds off the extent to which you become self-aware. So I'm going to teach you a technique, very simple one, called journaling. And this particular form of journaling is very, very easy. It's very, very quick. And it will give you a phenomenal insight into who you are, what's important to you, what your strengths are, what sort of situations challenge you, and allow you to work with yourself to develop yourself much more effectively. Let me tell you, that the form of journaling that we're going to talk about has an enormous amount of research behind it. I'll share just one piece at the end of this that looks at tremendous, it shows it's a tremendous tool for dealing with challenges and problems, for reducing stress and increasing resilience. And it has even been shown to have some really strong well-being impacts, health impacts. But that's another day's work. So this is where the pen and paper that I suggested you have on the front slide when we started, this is where you're going to need it. So if you don't have a pen and paper to hand, grab it while I tell you what the rules are. Here's what we're going to do. In a moment, I'm going to give you 4 prompts. Now, a prompt is, let me give you the first one. The sales situations I find most challenging are. And ask you to write down the prompt on the paper, and I'll give you 90 seconds, and I'll say, just start writing on that prompt, and don't stop writing until I ring the bell. Now, I don't want you to punctuate. I don't want you to correct your spelling. I don't want you to think about this. The idea is to just keep writing. As much as possible, keep the pen on the paper. And if you run out of something to say, just write, I've run out of something to say. And keep doing that until something comes again. So basically, I'll give you the prompt. You write down the prompt. You can be doing that now while I'm explaining. And when I say go, you'll have 90 seconds just to write. Okay, I'll tell you what you do with it when we're finished, but we're going to do that 4 times. So you got 90 seconds. Starting from now, write down the prompt. The sales situations I find most challenging are, and you've got 90 seconds. Start writing. Don't think about it, just write. Don't correct grammar, just write. 90 seconds, you're off. I can imagine a few people stopping to think about this. Don't. Just let the pen do the work. Keep it moving. Don't worry about punctuation and spelling. Just keep the pen moving. In a moment, when I ring the bell, you can just draw a line under whatever you've got, and I'm going to give you a second prompt. And there's your second prompt. If there's one part of the sales process I dislike, it is. So again, 90 seconds. And the key is just to keep the pen moving. Let it flow out of you. Don't feel the need to structure it. The third one is, I know I'm better than most salespeople. And if you're not a salesperson, I know I'm better than most people at. So again, start writing, just keep the pen moving. resist the temptation to be thinking about it or stopping to consider. Just let it flow. And then the final one, the part of the sales process I really love is 90 seconds. Okay, and that's the last one done. Now, what I'm going to suggest to you is when you finish the session, is that you just take a few minutes before you go back to what you're doing and have a quick read through what you've written. And once you've read through it, the process is very simple. Read through it and put it away. Don't sit down and think about it. Don't consciously say, oh, I'm going to ruminate about this. Just read it, see if anything jumps out at you, put it away. And I'll tell you how we're going to continue to build on that exercise a little bit. But this is just one slide to try and focus, or not focus, but summarize many of the benefits that have come out of, have been seen in journaling. There are 4 or 5 universities that have done really substantial studies that show the impact, as I say, on stress, on depression, on clarity, on problem solving, creativity, and even it has been shown interesting to have an impact on your immune system, which is kind of interesting. But you'll see that it talks about, because of the process of keeping one part of the brain busy while the creative part relaxes into it, can enhance the brain's intake, processing, retention, and retrieving of information. So a really great tool. Now, before we come back next time, what I'm going to be suggesting to you, and I'll show it to you now in a moment, is that you do that journaling exercise every second day, just with one of the prompts. And each time you do it, you'll sit down and give maybe 3 minutes to each prompt. You read what you've done on that prompt the last time. You sit down, give yourself 3 minutes, write again, look at the end of it, put it at the end of it, a quick read of it, put it away, and then 2 days later, do another one of the prompts. And what you're building here is greater insight into things that you know but you're not aware of. So these 3 exercises, one of them is building your brain's raw capacity for paying attention. Using the report, you're getting an idea of a clear awareness of how do other people actually perceive you. And the third one, you're looking at what am I challenged by? What are the things I love doing? Because when you know what you're really good at and what you really love, it means in those situations you'll turn up with tremendous confidence and tremendous self-assuredness. And when you're more aware of those things that challenge you, you'll show up in a more prepared manner, and maybe you'll show up with help for those situations that are more challenging for you. So keeping a weather eye on the clock, I'm going to move it on. Let me tell you what we need to do. I said that this is a program where you need to roll your sleeves up and get your hands dirty. And this week I'm giving you an amount to do. Now, when I say I'm giving you an amount to do, it's minutes. It is minutes a day. But if you follow the program, you will get results. I promise you'll get results. So here's what I'm advising you to do for next week. First thing, review your report. So play back this recording. Stop it at the part where we start to look through the report. Make sure you understand what's going on. And each time I say, look at page 7, which one of these scales is most important, pause the recording and think about it. And when it says which one of these need attention and why does it need attention, pause the recording and think about it. And see if you can come up with at least one, and maybe 2 or 3, not too many. 1 to 3 is all I'd look for. Actions for things that if you change them would have a big impact on anybody, on the people around you. Because I promise you, you change one of these behaviors, you change them all. They all impact, it has a ripple effect. A bonus might be to go back to the people who fed back on you and say, hey, thank you for great feedback. Here's the action I'm planning to take. Does that sound about right? Second thing, I'll show you this. Download the Insights Timer. Now, let me show you what that is. This is the single most downloaded meditation system on the web. I think it's now 5 million users, and they put a couple of 100,000 people through meditations every day. It's an outstanding app, and it's free. But it's also quite a, a prestigious thing to be accepted as a publisher on that, and we were accepted. So first thing, go onto Android, or you're either into the game store, isn't that what they call it on Android? I'm an iPhone person. Or into the iPhone App Store and search for Insight Timer and download it. When you get the timer, search for either Genos or Deiric, and you'll find our materials in there. They've published our full range of recorded meditations. And this is the one, the basic attention practice, that I'm suggesting that you practice daily between now and the next session. And the great thing with having this app, one is you have those practices in your pocket. So they're convenient. You can do it anywhere it's convenient for you, on the train, on the plane, on the bus, on the way home. Maybe not driving, please. But you can do it wherever suits you. And the other thing is there's a lot of other great guided meditations in there for sleep, for focus, for concentration. A really super, super app. So that's the second thing I'm asking you to do. Try and practice it each day. And the third one, every second day, take one of those 4 prompts. So take the first one, give it 3 minutes, journal upon it, put your journal away, come back to it 2 days later, take the second prompt, add those journaling notes to the first one, and work your way through there before you get back here next week. And journaling, by the way, we're using it to look at your preferences and your resources in a sales situation. But we're just about to release an app, which we'll give you all a copy of, that you can use for developing a personal vision, for pursuing your goals, for developing self-awareness outside of the sales environment, and for developing gratitude. And it's a highly, highly effective and highly, highly simple practice. So those are the 3 things that we're asking you to do. And I challenge you that if you take these on, to come back next week or next time and tell us how you got on. So next time we're going to be looking at awareness of others. We've just done session 1 and session 2, and that session is on May the 1st. So let me bring you back in, Aoife, so we can deal with the questions that are there. We have a massive 8 minutes left, and maybe you can just talk about the group there as well, because it's a very poignant number that's there.
Yeah. Actually, just today we welcomed our 600th member. Just today, I need to send that lady a private message and let her know as well. So yeah, we're delighted. We've had some great engagement, some really good articles being shared. So please, if you find anything interesting that you think will be useful to the group, share it in there. And we've had people in the past post in when they're struggling to stay committed to their practice. This is what we want. It's a collaborative group. So please, by all means, engage and work with each other. Often for me, when I was learning about my kind of mindfulness meditation journey, I needed an accountability buddy, someone to check in with on a weekly basis to talk about what I've done and how it helped me. And it just helps. We are all wired differently, but that really worked for me. So if you want to connect with someone, you can do that in the group. Okay, let me see. Questions. So if you have any questions, folks, chat them in there. We did have a few comments, Deiric. Benita shared that she just downloaded the app and they have 7 million meditators.
7 million. It has gone, it's taken off like a rocket. 7 billion. It's incredible.
Robin shares, congratulations, Genos. It's awesome.
Yeah.
to have the app. Oh, and I'll just share with the group here as well. One lady messaged in and said, but I have all tick marks. There's no numbers. And then right as we were answering the question, you shared the response, and that is because this particular lady is indeed demonstrating these behaviors just as much, if not more, than the level of importance. So great job.
Yeah.
We have no other questions right now. Again, must have been as thorough as ever, Deiric.
Yeah, I choose to believe that. Thank you very much. Thank you, folks.
What tends to happen, folks, is, you know, after you take some time with your report, aside from the session, you may have some questions then. So feel free to shoot them over to me, and I'll answer them, or I'll pose them to Deiric if I can't.
Yeah, super. Thanks, Aoife. And one of the questions that came up this morning from somebody, and it will come up in your mind if it hasn't come up in the session, because there is a trend in most reports that the hardest set of results comes from the individual feeding back upon themselves. So if you look in your report, you're probably going to see that you gave yourself a harder time than anybody else that rated you. And a lady this morning, she said, what does that mean? Does it mean I'm being too hard on myself? Or does it mean that they have a better view of me and I should listen to them? And there are lots of things it means, but in general, most of us tend to be 3 to 5 times more attractive to the negative, or more attracted to negative than positive. And so we tend to be a little harder on ourselves than we need to be. So we did a separate recording for a different program where we got this question so many times. We did a very brief 4 or 5 minute piece. And we're going to publish that with this recording so that you can have a look at it. And it just gives you a way of thinking about the results to see, is it a question that I'm just being too hard on myself and I need to look at what these people are saying and realize I have strengths I didn't know I had before? And folks, if that's what comes out of this program, did you get that awareness, that self-awareness, that there are strengths there that other people perceive and you didn't see? That's great. Or is it that they are seeing strengths, but I actually know that that the areas that just see me particularly strong in are areas that I still feel I need to develop? Just asking the questions raises your self-awareness. So it's never going to hurt you to be more self-aware, more present, more here with the people that you love and the people that you work with. So the more of these practices you can take on, the better. So
yeah, sorry, Deiric. Speaking of those practices, can you just recap which, and we will share again in the email, which are the practices that the group should be practicing? Yes,
and as you say, we will share that in the mail, but it's this one. This is the one I would focus on. You'll notice that the seat and feet is in there as well. So you've got that simple, quick seat and feet. You can use any of them that you like, but this is the one that's really about developing self-awareness, and this is the foundation stone for everything else that we do. If you can start to get that practice under control, it'll help you later to next time to start to build emotional awareness of yourself and other people. And so it's this one here. And it's actually, when you search for it, it's the first one that comes up. So it's organized so it's the first one you come up. So go for that. You can listen to any of them that you want. And I would say to you as well, if there are other challenges you have, there is so much really good stuff on that app. Aoife can tell you, it's just outstanding stuff. There's a lot of really high quality stuff.
Yeah, they just released a whole new section a few weeks ago for sleep, which is where I struggle. I learned about meditation because of my sleep struggles. Yeah. So really fantastic stuff.
Yeah. So there you go. So that's where we landed. I saw a couple of bings coming in there. Was that just about which one should I be focused upon?
Yep, that's it.
Look at that. Here
2 minutes to go.
17:28. We're 2 minutes ahead of time. Couldn't have timed it better. Folks, thank you very much. We're going to send out that material. Now, remember what we said last week. Send your questions to us. In fact, no, you know what? Don't send your questions to us. Pop any questions that you have or thoughts or ideas. Pop them up onto the group, because what we'll address them there is because any question you have, I guarantee you, lots of other people have them. So pop them up on the group and we'll address them there. And remember, we're posting articles there all the time. if you come across any great articles on mindfulness and emotional intelligence in sales, please sell them, or please post them. Everybody loves this material. So with that said, I've now used another minute, but if we say goodbye now, we can actually finish. Having started spot on time, we can finish spot on time. So folks, we will see you on May 1, please God. Thank you very much for taking the time. It has been a joy and a pleasure. For those of you who celebrate Easter, happy Easter. And we'll see you on May Day. Take care.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.